Welcome everybody to the second talk. My name is Jesse Gallup, Communications Director with the Secular Student Alliance, and I'm here to introduce Ed Clint. Ed is the president of the Illini Secular Student Alliance. He also served as a staff sergeant in the Air Force. He's studying biopsychology and was instrumental in starting the multi-campus event where a lot of students did the Everybody Draw Muhammad Day. But their group has also done things like the Good Without God bus ad campaign featuring the philanthropic works of Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and other non-theists. So when I heard his story about after Everybody Draw Muhammad Day and the work he's done with other religious groups on campus, I really wanted to share it, and I'm glad he has the chance to do so today. Let's welcome Ed.
Thanks, Jesse. You were my favorite breakdancing atheist. Jesse's the first person, I think, in the secular community I actually met outside of my own campus group. Back during the Muhammad thing, he gave me a call and said, "You guys are all kind of crazy." So I'm Ed Clint, president of the Secular Student Alliance. It's a great honor to address this conference. You're a very humbling crowd. At least I hope you are. I could do with some of that. So I'm here to talk about Transfaith. I'm really glad to be here, but I have to say I was a little bit angry because the first idea I pitched to SSA, I wanted to do a different talk, and they said no, I couldn't do that. I was actually going to call it "Do Be a Dick." Apologies to Phil Plate. I thought that would have been fun. JT told me we got that covered, and I said, okay, JT, let's do it. All right. Bear with me here. So I want to talk to you about Transfaith, and that's sort of my group ISA's MO for working outreach and working with religious groups. And we think it's kind of the antidote to some of the problems and issues that lots of groups like you have with working with religious groups. Since I'm going to talk about interfaith, I'll start with a little definition here. In my mind, and for this presentation, interfaith is sort of intergroup cooperation, where the groups can be religious and non-religious groups, such as yours, working together. Typically, this is service work, but not exclusively service work. Sometimes it's dialogue and that kind of stuff. And apart from doing service, it has the goal of like improving understanding, like humanizing us to each other, Christians, atheists, Muslims, whatever. And I think this is all terrific too, and my group certainly pursues these kinds of goals. But there's a problem in our community, in my mind, and that's that we have a polarizing view of groups, right? We think that you have to, as a person or as a group, you sort of have to be in this category or this one. You have to lean towards the firebrand, as we called it at the conference last year, or the diplomats. And I don't see it that way. And even last year, the really great presentations that defended the firebrands. So that this attitude is across the spectrum. It's on both sides. J.T. Ebert talked about how his activism-based group, eventually culminated in this awesome thing called Skepticon. And part of Greta Christina's really terrific talk was telling the diplomats to not be so critical of the firebrands because we need them. And also the reciprocal, like firebrands, stop calling the diplomats wusses. And that was great. I really appreciated that. But also those positions tacitly accept the position that firebrands and diplomats are two different kinds of groups, or two different kinds of people. And I think there's something wrong with that. It's as if there's a spectrum that we must fall on. And I just don't accept that. Sorry, we have kind of an unusual setup here. Where you really see this sort of polarizing disparity is when you do things that other groups don't like and they come to criticize you. And I want to give you some examples of that. So this is Lucy Gubins. And I'm not calling Lucy out because I'm not that kind of speaker. I actually think her and her group, the Alliance of Happy Atheists at Oregon, are terrific. I also think they're a very different kind of group than what I have because of some of the comments she makes here on the blog called Nonprofit Status. It's a well-trafficked blog, and one of the things she says in this call to open arms is that if you're, I don't know if you can read that, if you're a firebrand and you're sort of not that interested in the diplomats, I ask you to reconsider. You might be able to rally the secular troops, but you won't have much of a chance reaching out to the vast majority of the world, the believers. So if I'm a firebrand, then I will de facto not be good at outreach. And she's not the only one saying this kind of thing. A group on my campus called Interfaith in Action, in responding to our protest regarding creating images of the Prophet Muhammad, this is some of their, after we did that, they issued a statement, and this is part of it. They talk about some charity they did with Haiti, and then they said, these events provide a juxtaposition of two different campuses. One that displays pluralism, and another characterized by disrespect. It's a very black and white kind of statement. It's very you're us or you're them. Another group on our campus called Interfaith, Atheist, Agnostic, and Humanist, or IA for short, actually formed to oppose my group. And its president, shortly, about the same time frame, Jason Romero, said this. Basically what he's saying is that if my group, ISA, actually sat down with the Muslims after this, that it would not be productive because in doing the protest, we've been disrespectful. Like, there's something inherently disrespectful about the kind of activity that we do. So we can't even have a dialogue even if we try. So again, it's like there's this spectrum that you have to place yourself on, and if you're going to do that, then you're being alienating and insulting, and if you're not, then you're being respectful and constructive, and I don't think that we should accept this. Now, this isn't just rhetoric, too, so this is an empirical claim in my mind. This is a testable claim about what really happens. Does firebrandy or new atheist type activity, such as protest and vocal criticism, harm relationships with religious groups? Does it really establish that you have a disrespectful attitude? Does it preclude productive dialogue? These are not questions that we have to just hash out in rhetoric. We've done all these things, so we can look at what's actually happened in the real world. And that's what I intend to do. So let me tell you a little bit about ISA. Not all of our members are like new atheist types, but we're definitely new atheist heavy. We kind of lean towards, the Hitchens, Sam Harris end of the spectrum. We do protest work, like this one. We host and participate in student and professional debates. And we author blistering critiques of how religion is sometimes harming society. We write op-eds, we issue press releases, we do all this great stuff. And worst of all, as Jesse said, we carpeted our quad with images of the Prophet Muhammad. And if that weren't bad enough, we asked other campuses to join us in that. And you were crazy enough to actually do it. Chris Calvi's group at the University of Wisconsin, Cassie Burns at New Shift at Northwestern, and of course the Pastafarians at USC. Yeah. So, bear with me a moment. I'm on kind of a dual setup thing here. Okay, so if the Lucy Gobins and Stedmans, if the Jason Romeros of the world are correct and we've done all these things, then we must have done serious damage to our relationships with religious organizations on our campus. We must have hurt the chances for dialogue. We must have done all those things if they're correct. So let's find out if they're right, starting with the Catholics. Now let's face it, the Catholic Church is the lowest hanging fruit of new atheist criticism. Headlines coming out of the Vatican run the gamut from horrific to hilarious, and we've never been shy about commenting on those kinds of things. These are some of the snippets from our blog. This is an image from a protest we did called Have a Good Friday Night, which we did on Friday. What we did was we educated about the stance of the Vatican on HIV/AIDS in Africa while we were distributing condoms and promoting safe sex. And that's Passion Play Jesus with his necrophiliac entourage in the background, but we were not put off by that. Now, just a few weeks after that, a series of unusual events began to unfold. One of our allies on our campus is the director of the St. John's Catholic Newman Center diocese on our campus, and also a religious studies professor named Kenneth Howell, and he had helped us put on debates. We kind of knew who this guy was. He wrote an email that had remarks about homosexuality in the context of religious studies, his class, and this offended some people, and the university actually fired him very quickly. And this was, I'm not going to go into all the details of this case, but it was, in our estimation, an extreme breach of academic freedom and First Amendment rights, and we were very shocked and dismayed that this happened. So we opposed it. We stood by him. I wrote a strong letter to our chancellor. I implored other people to do the same. I published their contact info, and I wrote, I think, on the CFI blog that, I mean, this is what we have to do. If we believe in free speech, then we would be the grandest and saddest hypocrites not to stand by somebody like a professor, whether they're Catholic or not. We have to do that, and we did that. And it was quite a big story, especially in the Catholic press, that like the atheists were sort of standing by them. Now, if that wasn't strange enough, in response to these events, Dr. Howell actually wrote this piece and put it online called "The Atheist is Good Samaritan," talking about us and imploring Christians to be more like us and to open a dialogue. Now, so as a result of this, I made lots of friends I didn't exactly intend to make. But we got to see a very unusual sight in the internet and off the internet, and that's Christians rallying around atheists, sometimes in amusing and heartwarming ways. God bless you, atheists. But wait, we mean that in a good way, really. Sorry, not trying to offend you. It was very sweet. Anyway, because of all the backlash, the press was really grating on our university. They actually rehired Kenneth Howell, which is a cool win. And we continued to work with them throughout the year. This is an image from last fall where ISA sponsored and organized a panel about campus free speech. And that's Dr. Howell there on the right, Najir Majid from FIRE, and me on the left. And he has left our campus now. He took a better job at Chicago, but to this day, a very important ally of ISA. And I want to give the last word on this segment to Tricia Tan, who's somebody who I met during this controversy where he got fired, and she says, "I eagerly await that glorious day when we can return to our former occupations of debating the existence or non-existence of God." And this is the Christian talking, not us. And I say amen to that, Tricia. But what about debate? I never debated Kenneth Howell. Maybe if I had, questioned his theology on stage, then we wouldn't have got along so well. What if I mix it up with these smiling Christians? You think they'd still be smiling? As I mentioned earlier, throughout the year, we do lots of things that might incense Christians. Here's a couple shots from Blasphemy Rights Day, complete with Stone a Heathen. We let people post their own blasphemy. We love these events. We do them all year. And yet we're still friends with the Navigators. It's these folks. They're an evangelical, non-denominational group on our campus. Pretty well organized. So we invited them to a panel debate, and they agreed, maybe because they're bound by Jesus' rubric to forgive us. Anyway, I was one of the panelists. This was like a 5-on-5. This was not slow pitch, though. This was a rigorous, crowd-pleasing sort of exchange. And I want to read you a little bit. of one of my responses. I don't have a transcript of everybody's, but I want to give you a taste of what that debate was like. This is a question that was put to me. What is your view of Christ, and how does it compare with that of Christians? And this was determined in advance, by the way. And I said, I said I think there's quite a big difference between Christ and Christians that I know, at least Christians in America. Jesus unconditionally endorses torture as punishment and is the first to tell us the primary use of that torture is to punish the exercise of free religion. Christian Americans founded a nation based explicitly on breaking the first commandment. Everyone has a positive right to whatever gods they want. Jesus, in contrast, came to tell us that we'll be tortured for a zillion years for the crime of exercising our First Amendment rights. No sane person accused of any crime, large or small, would wish for Jesus to be their judge over the most average American Christian. For a heinous crime, a Christian might decide that I should be killed, but I think not one of them would decide that an infinite term of agony and pain was right or just. I think it just wouldn't occur to them. I think they're just not that monstrous and obtuse. That's because no prophet or God proposed by any religion in the entire history ever had the goodness of heart owned by the most common, ordinary human being. The difference between biblical Christ and Christians is that the Christians are much better. Now, I think this is not the response they were expecting, because I looked over and they were looking at each other they were kind of doing this, and not one of the five of them tried to respond to my response. They had time to do so, and they knew the question in advance. So after that particular debate, after talking again, we sort of adjourned to Murphy's, as is our tradition, our hometown tavern. And like everybody came, like the navigators were there, and I was there. And I met Norm Hubbard, who's their advisor for the first time. And Norm said to me, same things everybody else. He said, basically, you guys cleaned our clock. He said, you guys, bested us pretty handily, but we learned a lot, and we see where we need to improve, and we're really jazzed about that, and I hope we can do this again sometime. And everybody pretty much agreed with that, I think, how the debate had gone. I think they also agreed that I was a pretty big jerk, although they're Christians, so they're too polite to say it to me. But at least one person, at least one girl, a very serious-looking girl, was very perturbed, and she came up to me and said that she was a navigator and she had been in the audience. And she said, you really frustrated me up there. And I said, well, let me tell you why debate matters to us, And I started talking about why we think the truth matters and that kind of thing. Talked to her for about half an hour and found her to be delightful, by the way. And at about that time, she said to me, after the debate, I really didn't expect to like you. But she did. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was important because a month later, she became president of the Navigators, and I became president of ISA. And our friendship, and my friendship with Norm, who I also met that night, became the basis of the work that the Navigators and ISA would do for the next year. And we did plenty. And they suggested these, by the way. One of the first things we did was a crossover event, no pun intended. We found out that our meetings were on the same day, an hour apart, so the navigators came to our meeting, and they didn't know what the topic was going to be. They just agreed to come and listen to whatever we do. And they did. And after that, we went to their meeting, a good 10, 12 of us, and watched what their service was like, which was fascinating. I'm a psychology major, so maybe I was the only one that thought that, but... Closer to Christmas, we did a Giving Tree charity event. Again, about a dozen of us got together. And you can go and get sort of names of needy children in your area. And we went and together, and we went shopping for them. We bought some toys and some warm clothes and things like that. And I'm like a Tom Flynn atheist. I don't do Christmas at all. But I went on this trip, and it was a ton of fun, and it was a big success. And I absolutely loved it. A little bit later, and after the disaster in Japan, we organized an Interfaith bake sale. And you can see in this picture ISA and Navigators, and also Minority Association of Future Attorneys, which was a huge win for ISA because if it's something that we need, it's minorities and good legal advice. So this is a really successful event. We raised a bunch of money, and it happened at the tail end of a terrific year. Our year was made much more productive and enjoyable thanks to our relationship with the Navigators. But it never would have happened like that if I hadn't been on a stage taking a dull machete to Christian theology. That's not the only way it could have happened, but that's the way it did happen. So, In contrast, our relationship with the Muslims on our campus just a little bit over a year ago couldn't possibly have been more different from that. It probably couldn't have been worse. I think most of you know this story, at least how it started. You probably don't know how it ended, and I'm going to tell you about that today. This all started when Comedy Central heavily censored images of Muhammad in a South Park episode in response to death threats made against Trey Parker and Matt Stone by Islamist extremists. This was not for Everybody Draw Muhammad Day. This was actually a month before. We were acutely responding to that particular situation. And we decided that we were going to chalk simple images of the Prophet Muhammad on our quad in solidarity with Trey and Matt and to promote free speech on our campus. Now, the MSA actually caught wind of this, and they sent us a letter before we did it, asking that we not do it, explaining what their grievance was, and they suggested some alternatives too. It's a very congenial letter. I have to say, it was very polite. It was well written. We understood it. We responded in kind with our own letter, saying that we didn't really mean to attack any Muslims on campus, and we didn't really want them to be offended. It wasn't really about them. But that we felt it was necessary and important to proceed. It's a larger issue at stake, and so we had to continue. So that's how it happened that we carpeted our quad with more than 150 different images of Muhammad, pretty much like you see in the picture here. And they're not offensive. There's no bombs. There's no funny words or hats or anything like that. As you can imagine, there was some serious backlash to this. Some people in the national press compared what we did to drawing swastikas. People complained to our dean. Franklin and I had to go and explain ourselves to the dean of students. The campus Muslims began washing away what we did immediately, although that wasn't effective because we had carpeted the land so effectively. In response to the chalking, Chris Stedman... Well, actually, he's responding to AHA, the Madison group who followed us, and he says that you made an enemy where you could have made an ally. It sounds completely reasonable, but again, I'm an empiricist, so let's look at what really did happen instead of what might happen. Chris, the next term, I approached Yusra and Yusuf, who were the president and vice president of the MSA this past year. I went and talked to them, and I said, look, I know there's tension between our groups, and I want to remedy that. I told them that ISA doesn't have any ill regard for the MSA, and they agreed. And their board sat down with our board, and we eventually decided that they would come to one of our regular meetings, and we would have a kind of a Muslim-atheist mixer. Now, just to be clear, I didn't at any point apologize for what ISA did. I don't feel apologetic about that. And I didn't avoid the issue either. When they came to our meeting and I introduced them, I said, among other things, we're a group that criticizes Islam. We even criticize Islamic culture. And if we're going to do that, then we need to at least learn a little bit about Islam, and we need to meet some actual Muslim human beings. So I wasn't avoiding anything, and I wasn't apologizing for anything. So we had refreshments, and we broke into little groups, little atoms of atheists clustered about Muslim nuclei. And there wasn't like set topics. People talked about whatever they wanted to. I wandered a bit, and people were talking about everything from politics to theology to what's your major. That's actually a question I asked, by the way. Do you think Jesus and Muhammad ever hang out? It turns out the answer is no. I was kind of sad about that. I like the idea. They could share stories, sing songs. So there were some really terrific. That quote is actually not real, by the way. Just so you know. Before we did this, some of my officers said, like, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I'm not sure this is going to go well. And I disagreed. I knew right away that it was going to be awesome. And that's because I had met so many of the MSA officers, and I found them to be like terrific, good-humored, sincere people, and I knew that they would get along just famously, and they did. It was way successful. Everybody had a fine time. Our meetings are normally about an hour, and I let this one run like 40 minutes late because everyone was having a fine time, and I ended it like just because I had to. And this was just the start of our relationship. After this, we went to their Islam Awareness Week and participated in their events. It was a good time. This is one of the other things we did at Interfaith Board Game Night. There's actually ISA and Navigators and the Muslims. This was really well attended. They really got a kick out of this. A couple of months ago, I sent Yusra and Yusuf an email to thank them for their help with everything this year. And they sent me a reply, and I wanted to read you a little bit about what Yusuf said to me. I highly valued the dialogue we were able to share, and I only wish we had done it sooner. Through your organization, we were given multiple opportunities to meet with and speak to new audiences, and I thank you immensely for that. At the same time, we got the opportunity to learn about your beliefs and values. I was surprised yet excited at both the common values between our groups, as well as the respect in light of differences of opinion. I can't tell you how many times I've used the interactions between the MSA and ISA as an example to our own members of why it's important not to judge someone based on their faith or beliefs. And I can safely say that we both witnessed that from these experiences. I think I even summarized the encounters in a law school application about the rewards of diversity. Anyone at our board can tell you how proud I am to recount the whole thing at any opportunity. I hope the MSA and ISA can continue to work on bigger and better things in the years to come. Please don't waste the relationship we've built. I'm very sad to be leaving this behind and would like to stay involved as much as possible. Sincerely, Yusuf Ahmed. So I hope by now we can be done with this claim, at least in an unqualified state. I think it's ridiculous and we shouldn't accept it. And I hope this establishes to you why we need something new. We need a new approach, maybe a new word, a new way of looking at this. And to me, that's transfaith. That's what I want to go with. Why transfaith and not interfaith? Well, for one thing, it's more inclusive. It's etymologically more inclusive. Some of you think it's a petty thing that why get hung up on the semantics in the word, and I agree with that normally. But it does bother a lot of people because inter means between, and between faiths doesn't make any sense for us. But trans can mean beyond, and it can mean across. So it includes the religious groups, and it can mean people who are beyond religious belief as well. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's just more inclusive. And there's no political baggage. There's nobody who's felt alienated or attacked in the name of transfaith. Transfaith, we want to use as a means of doing outreach and service, not as a means of criticizing opponents who we disagree with. And lastly, we think that it engenders a more authentic and more sincere form of respect. We think that it's a little bit hypocritical to espouse diplomacy while leveling unwarranted partisan criticism at groups because you don't like their activism philosophy. Maybe this will help. Transfaith, it's like Google+. Look, it's nothing terribly new, but we're doing it in a better way with a lot of less of the irksome baggage that maybe you don't like. Also, a lot of people think like Facebook is the only game in town. They think Interfaith is the only game in town, and we're here to tell you it's not the only game in town. There's Transfaith now. There's Google+. You should really do both. Really. Okay, in closing, I want to head off some of your criticism real quick. I want to tell you need to carve your own path. And I'm not here to tell you that you should work with religious groups or not. You have to decide at your campus what's best. But I do want to say that if you do feel compelled to criticize religion and to stand up against injustice sometimes, and you also still want to do outreach and establish dialogue, don't be bullied by sanctimonious tolerance mavens who want to tell you that you can't do both, because you can. I also want to say we're not pioneers. I know a lot of you are doing just what ISA has done, and I only know about ISA, so that's what I'm talking about. But I hope I'm articulating some of your frustration instead of just ours. And finally, I don't want it to look like it's easy, like it's. I've showed you some of our successes. It's not. The road is often hard. There's groups on our campus who will not work with us because we're atheists. That's it. Like, you're atheist, we're not going to work with you. And that's unfortunate, but that's not really your fault. You can't really worry about that. These aren't the kind of groups that we think constructive relationships should be possible, even if you somehow persuaded them to come along. And that's because people whose friendship or esteem is worth having will never castigate you simply for abiding your own conscience. They'll never turn their back on you over simple differences of opinion. And it's immoral and a waste of effort to court the respect of the fundamentally unreasonable. If our stories have moved you at all, I implore you to join ISA and her allies in fostering Transfaith, which I think is a new, simpler, more respectful, and genuine form of service and outreach work. Thank you.